There is a city that never remembers the sun. Its skyline is a crown of dying lights, its rivers reflect only the color of iron, and the air itself carries the taste of forgotten prayers. The living hurry through its veins like ghosts in borrowed skin, whispering promises to survive until morning. Among them walks a girl named Eira. To most, she is no one, another shadow moving through the rhythm of survival. Yet, the city turns its eyes whenever she passes. Somewhere beneath the weight of her calm steps, fate begins to stir. Eira has always dreamed in colors that do not exist. She paints visions that feel like confessions from another life. Silver corridors, candlelit mirrors, a face she never remembers clearly but feels she has loved forever. Her walls are covered with him. Every night when the city folds into its sleepless hush, she feels something watching her through the glass of her window. Something ancient, patient, almost tender. They say every heartbeat is a countdown. For Eira, it has always felt like a summoning. No one knows when he returned. The man whose name the night itself once feared to speak, Lucien, the last pureblood of a forgotten line. His heart no longer beats, yet it remembers every life he has destroyed in the name of love. He was not meant to love again. Every vow he made, every drop of blood he shed, was meant to keep him from her, from the reincarnated soul of the woman whose death once unmade him. But destiny is not kind, and when Lucien stepped into Blackridge again, the air itself seemed to pause, as if recognizing the scent of a curse it once knew by heart. There are rules that keep night creatures hidden. Never linger where you once bled. Never look twice at a mortal. Never answer when the past calls your name. Lucien breaks all three the moment he sees her. Eira, standing in the rain at a bus stop, drenched, clutching her sketchbook to her chest, drawing something she doesn't understand. His eyes. The city keeps its secrets, but the sky does not. That night the moon turns red. Every story begins with hunger. This one begins with recognition. Lucien watches her from across the street, and for the first time in centuries, something inside him moves. Not thirst, not rage, but a forgotten ache. He remembers the last time that face looked at him, not with fear, but love. Before fire took her, before the curse sealed his heart in silence. He tells himself it isn't her. He tells himself it can't be. But the curse does not forget. It waits. That night, when Eira sleeps, her dreams shift. She sees a cathedral drowned in moonlight, a man standing at its center, eyes the color of ruin. She hears his voice like thunder beneath water. You found me too soon. She wakes with blood on her palm and the sound of distant bells echoing through the city. Outside, on the rooftop opposite her window, a single figure stands motionless beneath the red moon, watching. And when he turns away, the shadow of his movement paints her room in the shape of wings. Because some angels fall twice, once for heaven and once for love. Rain came before morning. It fell in slow sheets, whispering against the windows of Blackridge like an old language that only the dead remembered. The city exhaled steam and sleep. And in the middle of it, Eira painted. Her small apartment smelled of turpentine and wet clay. The light bulb above her desk flickered, weak as a dying pulse. She didn't notice. She was chasing an image she couldn't name. Gray paint bled into black, black into crimson, and from the crimson rose the shape of a man. The more she painted, the clearer he became. Tall, severe, a shadow wrapped in tailored calm. And eyes that seemed to pull color from the world. When she stopped, she realized her hands were trembling. The brush slipped, cutting a thin streak across the canvas like a wound. Outside, thunder rolled once. Across the city, in a forgotten district where no one walked after dark, Lucien stood at the window of a house that hadn't been a home for 100 years. He did not need to breathe, but he drew the scent of rain anyway. Somewhere in that rain was her heartbeat, the one he'd sworn never to follow again. He had seen her. He should have left. Yet he had watched her until the last streetlight died, memorizing the way she existed, alive and unknowing, while every part of him ached with recognition. For creatures like him, time was a cruel mirror. The centuries stripped away everything: names, faith, guilt, but not longing. He closed his eyes and listened. Beneath the city's hum, he could hear it, the whisper of blood, calling blood. The curse was awake again. Long ago, before death made him eternal, Lucien had begged the night for release. It answered with silence. The only mercy it gave was memory, and memory, he learned, was the sharpest blade. Now that blade stirred. It carried her scent. It carried her name. He whispered it once, and the candlelight in the room bent toward him like a prayer. By afternoon, the rain eased. Eira left her apartment with the canvas half finished, unable to look at the man she'd painted. The streets were glossy with reflections. Every window threw back a version of herself she didn't trust. She walked without destination until she reached the old quarter, a maze of narrow lanes where iron balconies sagged under ivy and thyme. The air there was colder, quieter, as if sound itself avoided the stones. That was where she saw him. Only for a moment, standing beneath an archway, hands in his pockets, watching her as if he'd been waiting since the beginning of the world. His face was the same one from her painting. She blinked and he was gone, but the air stayed charged, humming with the echo of his presence. Something inside her shifted, a pulse, not of fear, but of belonging. When she reached home, the painting was dry. She stared at it until dusk bled across her walls, and the painted eyes seemed to look back, alive with some quiet sorrow. Night again. Lucien walked the edge of the rooftops, his coat trailing like smoke, the city's lights glittering beneath him like a sea of stolen stars. Every sense told him to turn away, but something older than reason whispered otherwise. He had tried to forget love. Love had remembered him. And in that remembering, the curse began to stir. Far below, Eira's window burned with a single lamp. He stopped above it, motionless, listening. Her heartbeat was soft but unbroken, a rhythm that did not yet know its danger. He closed his eyes and felt the first ache of hunger, not for blood, but for the impossible warmth he once held. For the living, longing is a wound. For the immortal, it is the only proof they were ever alive. Days passed as if the city were holding its breath. The rain stopped, but the streets never dried. Mist clung to the stones like a memory that refused to fade. Eira moved through it quietly, her sketchbook always in her hands, filling its pages with fragments she could not explain, doorways that did not exist, hands reaching through glass, a moon too close to the earth. Sleep gave her no rest. Each night she dreamed of corridors lined with candles and a sound that was not quite music. She would wake with her heart racing, certain that someone had spoken her name from the other side of the dark. Something inside her had begun to change. Colors looked sharper. The air around her tingled when she touched metal. Once at the corner of an alley, she saw her own reflection blink half a second too late. In another part of the city, Lucien watched these changes through the veil of distance. The bond had begun to open. He could feel her thoughts brushing against his mind like wings. Every pulse of her blood reminded him of the vow he had broken centuries ago, the one that had chained his existence to hers through death and return. The curse was simple. Each time their souls met, love would bloom, and with love would come her end. His immortality was the cage that kept the wheel turning. He told himself he would not intervene. He would let her live a mortal life untouched. But the hunger that lived beneath his calm was older than his promises. The hunger was not for her blood. It was for the sound of her breath, when she looked at the world as if it still deserved wonder. On the 7th night, the moon rose swollen and red again. Eira walked home from her small job at the gallery, her footsteps echoing through the narrow streets. Somewhere behind her, another set of footsteps answered, too light, too precise. She did not turn. She already knew. Fear never came, only recognition. She reached her door and paused. The air smelled of iron and rain. The city around her fell silent, as if waiting for a note that had not yet been played. When she stepped inside, every candle she owned flared to life at once. Shadows spun across the walls like a dance. At the center of the room hung her painting, the man's face she had tried to forget. The paint had darkened, the eyes alive with crimson light. Her hand lifted toward it and the air turned cold. A pulse, deep and ancient, struck through her body. For an instant she saw not her apartment, but the cathedral again, the same one from her dreams, drenched in moonlight and sorrow. Somewhere in that vision someone moved, the same presence that haunted her sleep, and beneath it all, a whisper that was not sound, but memory. "Remember me." She gasped, the vision breaking like glass. The room was still again, the candle steady. But on her wrist, where the sleeve had fallen back, a thin mark now curved across her skin, the faint outline of a bite that had never happened. Lucien felt it at the same moment, a flash of warmth along his own wrist, the mark answering through time. The bond was complete. He looked out across the city, the horizon pulsing with the light of distant storms, and knew there was no retreat left. The past had found them again. The city slept under a bruise-colored sky. Fog rolled along the riverbanks and gathered beneath the bridges like a slow-moving tide of ghosts. Somewhere beneath that fog, a church bell rang only once, its echo swallowed by the rain-soaked air. Eira woke to the sound, though no bell existed near her home. Her pulse answered it, steady and terrified, as if her blood remembered what her mind had forgotten. The mark on her wrist burned faintly, not with pain, but with recognition. All day she drifted through the hours like someone walking inside another person's memory. At work, she stared at canvases she had not painted, images that seemed to breathe when she looked away. Flashes of marble, moonlight on water, and a man's silhouette framed by stained glass. By dusk, she could no longer resist the pull. Her feet carried her without reason toward the oldest quarter of Blackridge, where the streets twisted like veins. There, between two buildings that leaned together as if whispering secrets, stood an archway she had never noticed before. Beyond it lay the cathedral from her dreams. The doors were carved from black oak, the stone walls slick with centuries of rain. Every window shimmered with fractured light, shards of crimson and silver trembling like living veins of glass. When she stepped inside, the air changed. It was colder, thinner, humming with something ancient. Candles floated in the nave without flame, their glow soft and white as breath. Dust hung suspended in columns of moonlight, forming patterns that shifted when she moved, as if unseen hands traced them for her. A whisper rose through the silence, low and unhurried. "You should not have come here." She froze. The voice did not echo. It lived inside the stillness itself. And yet she felt no fear, only inevitability. At the far end of the aisle, beneath the broken rose window, a figure stood. Black coat, pale face, eyes that caught the light like the edge of a blade. He did not move, but the space between them seemed to breathe. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. Time folded back on itself, showing her another night, another body lying across an altar, her own voice crying a name that tasted of blood. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she already knew. Lucien lowered his gaze as if the question wounded him. The one who was supposed to stay forgotten. The air trembled. Each candle bent toward him, their light thinning into strands that wrapped around his hands. Eira saw the faint glimmer of fangs when he spoke again, but there was sorrow in it, not hunger. "I waited," he said softly, "and the world built walls between us, yet here you are again, tearing them down." Her knees weakened. The cathedral seemed to expand, its walls sighing like lungs that had not drawn air in centuries. A pulse moved through the floor beneath her feet, ancient, rhythmic, answering the beating in her chest. Outside, thunder rolled. The glass in the windows flared red. Every color in the cathedral deepened to the hue of heart-blood. Lucien took one step forward. The light followed him like devotion. Eira's voice was barely sound. "I've seen you before." He nodded once. "You have died in my arms 100 times." The words fell like ash, heavy with memory. In their wake came silence, thick and absolute. Only the rhythm of her heart remained, and the faint hiss of the rain beginning again beyond the stone walls. When he reached the last step between them, he did not touch her. He simply stood close enough that she could feel the cold aura that surrounded him, a chill that carried the scent of night air and old sorrow. She lifted her hand. The mark on her wrist gleamed faintly, and his matching scar brightened in answer. The curse was fully awake. For an instant, every candle flared white, the cathedral filled with wings of light, feathers of glass and shadow swirling above them. In that storm of radiance, she saw not a monster but a memory bee. The light shattered like frozen rain. Fragments of glass and radiance spun through the air before vanishing, leaving only the echo of their brilliance and the faint taste of iron on the tongue. Eira staggered backward, her hand pressed to her chest, though her heart was not beating any faster. It was changing. Lucien stood where the light had died, his eyes darker now, their silver drowned beneath shadow. For a moment he seemed almost human, breathing, fragile. But then the illusion faltered. His reflection in the nearest window did not move. Outside, the storm deepened. Rain struck the stained glass like thrown stones, and far above them, the bell tower groaned as though something ancient had woken within it. Eira's blood pulsed in answer, calling, remembering. The mark on her wrist brightened until it burned white, and with each heartbeat, a faint tolling sound trembled in the air, soft, spectral, as if the bell high above was echoing her pulse. Lucien whispered, "It begins again." She looked up at him. The words were too heavy for her to carry, yet she understood. This was not the first awakening, nor the second. It was another turn of an endless circle, one that began centuries ago with a promise neither of them had managed to break. Once, when the world still believed in miracles, they had defied both heaven and death. Now the curse of that defiance crawled through their blood. Each rebirth drew them together, each meeting tore them apart. Eira could not remember the first lifetime clearly, but she felt its echoes in her bones. The cold marble altar, the taste of rain and tears, the sound of a bell tolling midnight as Lucien's fangs sank into her throat not in hunger but in despair. Her voice trembled. "Why does it hurt to remember you?" Lucien closed his eyes. "Because memory is the cruelest form of immortality." He turned toward the altar, its cracked surface etched with symbols she did not recognize. Dust had gathered thickly there, yet the grooves glowed faintly red beneath the grime. With a movement too soft to be human, he brushed his hand across the stone. The glow responded, alive, pulsing like veins beneath the cathedral floor. The bell began to toll. Once, twice, thrice. Each sound rippled through the air and struck something deep inside her. Her pulse synchronized with it, a slow, dreadful rhythm. And beneath that rhythm came another, a whisper of voices long dead calling her name through time. The air thickened. The candles bowed their flames. The cathedral trembled as if remembering the countless rituals it had witnessed in secret. Lucien turned back to her. "Every century the bell awakens the blood between us. Every time I find you, it tolls once more. And when it stops..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Eira could feel the truth rising in her, the knowledge that each toll brought them closer not to salvation, but to ruin. Lightning flared beyond the windows. For a heartbeat, she saw their shadows thrown high upon the wall, his shape merging with hers, their outlines tangled in the same bloom of light. It looked like an embrace and a warning both. Lucien reached for her, then stopped just before his hand touched her cheek. "If I touch you now, the curse will complete itself too soon." Her whisper barely formed words. "And if you don't?" He looked at her with centuries of longing burning quietly behind his eyes. "Then I lose you again when dawn comes." The bell tolled a fourth time. The sound fractured something inside her mind. Memories flooding, images bleeding together. A night of fire. A vow whispered in the ruins of a monastery. Her own voice promising to return to him even if heaven forbade it. Blood trickled from her nose, glowing faintly red before fading. The curse was waking faster than it should. Lucien stepped back, his voice raw. "Eira, Listen to me. The bell will toll 7 times. When it does, you must leave this place. If you stay, the 7th toll shook the city. It rolled over rooftops and cobblestone streets deep and final, shaking dust from forgotten corners. Eira's legs burned, but she did not stop. The tower rose ahead, black and jagged, slicing the sky. Rain pelted her face, mingling with sweat and blood from the mark on her wrist, now pulsing with a light of its own. Inside the tower, shadows moved like living things. The spiral stairs coiled upward endlessly, whispering secrets that had been trapped for centuries. Each step she took hummed with memory, past lives, past deaths, the echo of a man she had never known yet could not forget. At the top, the bell chamber yawned like a cavern. The great bell swung above, suspended by chains black with age. Beneath it, the floor was etched with sigils that glowed faintly red. Lucien's voice whispered through the storm, "Do not touch it." She did not turn, she did not look, but she felt him behind her, a presence in every shadow, a weight in every heartbeat. "Do not touch it," he had said. Yet she knew somehow that she must. The bell began to move on its own, swinging slowly. Each motion sent shock waves through the air, rattling the stones, rattling her chest, rattling the mark on her wrist. She reached out, fingers trembling, and pressed her palm against the nearest sigil. The room exploded in light. Visions struck her all at once, nights of blood, centuries of waiting, 1,000 kisses stolen between moments of death. She saw Lucien falling through centuries, his fangs never sinking, his soul never resting, always tethered to hers. She saw herself, over and over, dying and returning, always the same choice: love him or leave him. And in the center, the bell rang one final deafening toll. The sound shook her body, her vision blurred. And then, as if time itself had stopped to witness it, she saw him, Lucien, not in shadow, not in memory, but alive, standing before her. His eyes were molten silver, trembling with the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. "Eira," he whispered. The word hit her like a blade wrapped in silk. She reached for him, finally letting herself feel the pull that had haunted her for centuries. His hand found hers, warm against the cold, and for a heartbeat, the curse held them suspended in eternity. But eternity cannot last. Lightning split the sky outside, and the tower shook. The bell swung faster, furious now, thrumming with the weight of destiny. Eira felt it clawing at her from beneath the skin of her wrist. The mark burned with intensity, screaming for release. "Run," Lucien urged, his voice breaking, "or the curse will take you now." Her mind screamed with one thought: I cannot leave him. The 7th toll struck with finality, and the world seemed to fracture. The bell's echo swallowed sound itself. The sigils flared white, burning through her vision. And then she felt it, the pull of the curse, dragging her, twisting her, threatening to unravel her very soul. Lucien's hand tightened around hers, and for one suspended moment, they were the only two beings in the universe. Nothing else existed, not rain, not stone, not the storm outside. Only them, bound by blood and memory, by love that could neither die nor live without destruction. The light shattered, and then she was falling. Eira fell, though the floor of the tower never came. The world stretched and warped, folding like smoke around her. Light fractured into shards of silver and crimson, stabbing through the dark like knives. Every heartbeat echoed backward and forward at once, a rhythm she both remembered and had never known. Lucien's hand stayed clasped around hers. The warmth was impossible, a tether against the void that threatened to swallow her. His eyes were fixed on hers, molten and relentless, burning with centuries of sorrow and longing. "You're mine," he whispered, not as a threat, but as truth, as inevitability. She could not answer. Words would have shattered the fragile space they occupied. Instead, she felt the pull of the curse, an ancient hunger clawing at the marrow of her bones. The bell's 7th toll had not ended. It had awakened something older than Blackridge, older than both of them. Around them, shadows moved like living things, stretching and twisting. They carried whispers of forgotten deaths, of kisses stolen in the darkness, of promises broken and remade across lifetimes, She realized, with a shiver, that she was seeing fragments of herself in every shadow, every past Eira who had lived and died because of him. Lucien's voice reached her again, low and insistent. "You must remember everything, or we will be lost." Memory struck like a spear. She saw the first time their souls had touched centuries ago in a monastery scorched by fire. She saw herself lying beneath him, blood flowing where love and fate had collided. She saw his face, unchanging and eternal, screaming silently against the cruelty of eternity. And she remembered love. It was not gentle. It was fire and ice, hunger and surrender, devastation and salvation all at once. Her chest burned with it, her blood sang with it, and she knew that in this world, in every world, she would choose him again, even if it meant death. The shadows recoiled. The tower's walls trembled as though the universe itself feared what was unfolding. Light and darkness collided, spinning around them in a storm that no mortal mind could comprehend. Lucien lifted her slightly, holding her against him as they floated in that void between worlds. "Eira, you are the only thing that makes this endless centuries-long curse bearable." She clung to him, the mark on her wrist flaring brighter than the moon. Bright enough to blind the shadows, bright enough to pierce eternity itself. A voice rose above the storm, older than time. "They cannot be allowed to love." The curse manifested, a coiling shadow that tried to separate them, wrapping around their legs, their hearts, their very souls. It hissed and seethed, a living void demanding obedience, threatening erasure. Eira tightened her grip. "We will defy you." Lucien's eyes glimmered. Together. The shadows shrieked, and the cathedral around them dissolved, leaving only the storm, the void, and the two of them. And then, in the silence between heartbeats, the first thread of hope appeared. A faint glimmer in the darkness, the only thing standing between them and oblivion. It was not much, but it was enough. They would fight. They would remember. They would love. But the cost had yet to be revealed. Time no longer existed. The world had narrowed to the space between them, a thread of air and shadow, a heartbeat stretched into centuries. Eira clung to Lucien, and in that desperate hold she felt every weight he had carried. The lives he had watched end, the promises he had broken, the loneliness that had gnawed at his soul through every century of darkness. The curse had not spoken in words, yet its presence was deafening. It coiled around them like smoke, twisting the air, bending the light, seeking to claim her as it had so many times before. Lucien's lips brushed her temple, a touch so fleeting it might have been imagined. "We are bound, Eira, through everything. Through every death, every loss. This is not the first time you've saved me." She pressed her forehead to his chest, listening to the echo of a heartbeat that was not his, not entirely hers, yet both. She felt it, the pulse of lifetimes intertwined, an invisible tether that even the curse could not sever. Then the storm spoke. The shadows shifted, thickened, coalesced into shapes that hungrily reached for her. They hissed with voices of all the Eiras that had died before her, voices screaming, crying, warning. She shut her eyes, and in the darkness she saw a vision. A glass cathedral shattered, shards raining down across centuries. A man who was not human. A girl who was not afraid. Hands reaching for each other even as the world sought to tear them apart. Her whispered breath broke through the void. "I will not leave you." Lucien's hand brushed her cheek. "Then we endure it together." The shadows recoiled at the certainty in her voice, but they did not vanish. They circled, hungry, patient, eternal. They were the curse itself, a living force that had watched their love for centuries and would not relent. Lightning split the void, illuminating the terror and beauty around them. Eira felt the mark on her wrist flare with blinding intensity, each pulse synchronized with Lucien's heartbeat, with the tolling bell that still haunted the air, with the infinite rhythm of the curse. And then it moved. The darkness struck, not with claws, but with intent. It sought to pull her away, to erase the bond, to undo every heartbeat that had brought them to this point. Lucien's voice cut through it, low and commanding, the authority of centuries giving weight to every syllable. You will not take her. Not now. Not ever. The shadows hesitated. For a fleeting moment they faltered, recognizing a force older than themselves. The power of love, enduring, defiant, eternal. Eira opened her eyes. She could see the forms now, writhing and twisting, trying to consume the light, trying to pull her apart from him. She pressed her palm to her chest, and the mark burned so fiercely that the darkness recoiled as if her own blood had become a weapon. You cannot have me, she whispered. The curse hissed, a sound like shattered glass. It lashed outward, but the tether between them held. Every heartbeat, every pulse, every brush of thought carried defiance. Lucien pulled her closer. We will find the way, Eira, even if it kills us. And in that instant, suspended between shadow and light, the two of them understood a truth that was older than the curse, older than death, older than the city itself. Their love was not meant to end quietly. It was meant to burn. The edge of forever was a place without ground, without sky, without mercy. The tower had dissolved entirely, leaving only Eira and Lucien suspended in a void of darkness and light. The storm of shadows circled them endlessly, a living tempest hungry for a heart it could never claim. Eira felt the pull of the curse, a force coiling around her bones, whispering of endings, of centuries of love unfulfilled, of death waiting patiently for her surrender. Yet she clung to Lucien, and through that grasp the impossible became tangible. You feel it, he said, voice low, intimate, the weight of eternity pressing against every syllable. The curse. It will not let us leave, not without a choice. One of us must fall, or both will be consumed. She did not flinch. Her heartbeat, steady and defiant, echoed like a drum through the void. Then let it take me, if that's the only way to save you. Lucien's hand trembled, his centuries-old composure cracking for the first time. I will not let you die again. Not for me. The shadows surged, drawn to the desperation in their bond, sensing weakness, seeking a fracture to exploit. Their forms were monstrous, twisting, infinite, and yet something faltered. The tether between them glowed, a radiant thread of blood and memory that the darkness could not sever. Eira felt her past lives brush against her mind. The nights she had died in his arms, the moments of love she had clung to across centuries, the unbearable sweetness of reunion and the searing agony of loss. And then, through the pain, clarity. The curse was not just punishment. It was a test. And in this suspended edge of forever, the answer was hers to give. She stepped closer to Lucien, letting the shadows swirl around her like smoke, letting the darkness touch her without fear. We endure it together, she whispered. The words were not just defiance, they were a declaration, a promise. Lucien's eyes softened, silver and molten all at once. Then we face it, until the last bell tolls. The void began to collapse inward, the shadows coiling tighter, striking outward with all the weight of centuries. Eira felt the pressure, the pull of oblivion threatening to erase her, to take Lucien, to unbind the tether that had sustained them. And yet, with every step they took toward each other, the curse faltered. The tie of their blood, their memories, their undying love pushed back the darkness, forcing it to retreat. They moved together, hands clasped, hearts synchronized. Every heartbeat, every pulse of blood, every whispered memory of love strengthened their resistance. For the first time in centuries, the shadows shrieked, not with triumph, but with rage. They could not sever what had been bound by eternity, by fate, by fire and blood and longing. And then in the heart of the void the bell rang one final time. Not a toll of warning, but a toll of surrender. The sound resonated through them, through the tether, through the storm. The shadows dissolved. The void softened. The light returned, pale and trembling. And in it, Eira and Lucien stood together, alone but unbroken. Breathless, trembling, they did not speak. Words were no longer necessary. The weight of centuries, the pain, the longing, the curse, they had survived it all. And in the silence that followed, a single truth remained. Love, even cursed, even condemned, even doomed, could endure forever. But the price of forever was only just beginning to reveal itself. The city of Blackridge had returned in fragments, shadows retreating, streets wet with rain, the moon pale but unwavering above. Yet for Eira and Lucien, the world was no longer simple. It had become something fragile, something earned with the weight of centuries. They stood atop a building where the wind sliced like knives, her hair plastered to her face, his coat flaring behind him like a dark banner. The curse had been tempered, the shadows banished, but at a cost she could feel in every pulse of her veins. Her wrist bore the mark still, faint now, a reminder that love is never free. Each heartbeat echoed with memory, with the echo of every death they had survived, every moment of loss that had brought them here. Lucien's hand found hers, warm and solid, grounding her. His eyes were softer now, molten silver tempered by centuries of longing and sorrow. "We survived it," he murmured, voice low, almost breaking. "We endured what none should endure." Eira leaned against him, her breath mingling with his. "And yet, we are still here." He nodded. "Still bound, still cursed, still alive. But we have chosen each other. And sometimes, that is enough." The city around them was silent, but the silence was not empty. It was full of possibility, of endings and beginnings tangled together. The rain had ceased, leaving a slick sheen on the streets below, reflecting moonlight like silver veins. Eira could feel the weight of eternity pressing softly on her soul. Love had won, but it had left them changed. They were not the same people who had first crossed paths in shadow. They were older, wiser, and burdened by the memory of all they had endured. Lucien lifted her chin, his fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, fleeting, yet it carried centuries of promise. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Her lips curved in a small, bittersweet smile. "Even if the world tries to take us apart again?" He shook his head, eyes burning with intensity. "Even then, always." And in that moment, standing atop a city that had forgotten the sun, beneath a pale, forgiving moon, Eira and Lucien embraced, not as cursed beings, not as victims of fate, but as lovers who had endured everything and emerged from the darkness. The wind whispered through the streets below, carrying the memory of their struggle, the pulse of their bond, the echo of a love that even death could not claim. The city of Blackridge had forgotten the sun, but for them, the night had been enough. They held each other as the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, not knowing what the next century would bring, but certain of one truth: love, even dark and doomed, even bitter and fleeting, was eternal when it was earned in fire and shadow. And for a moment the world was still. The curse would wait, the shadows would return. But they had each other, and in that embrace, eternity itself felt human.